아이씨, 강아지.
뭐야? 누구야 이 시간에?
뭐냐?
For the past year or so, I've been trying to take the bold leap from the world of student films to a full-blown feature, and the results have been interesting.
I'm the furthest thing from depressed. I mean, look at what I've accomplished. Do you see him? Do you think a depressed person could make this? No.
My main point of contention has been something that I've always struggled with as a writer: the second act. For the longest time, I hated writing second acts. To me, storytelling felt like a way to get to point A to point B. Point A and B are the interesting parts, the stuff I love writing, not the filler in between. But can you blame me? The first and third acts get these exciting terms like inciting incident, point of no return, climax, and falling action. The second act really only gets one: the MidAct Twist. A term I felt got glossed over in my screenwriting classes that honestly really shouldn't, because to me, a good MidAct Twist can be what separates a good film from a great film. So let's talk about it. But first though, a quick disclaimer, which is basically, not all movies are the same. Filmmaking and screenwriting is not an exact science, and there are plenty of great films that defy traditional narrative structure. However, almost every movie needs some form of structure, and if you're struggling with writing your big feature or short, I hope you find this helpful. So, what is a MidAct Twist? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's a twist in the story that happens midway through the film. Now, when I talk about a twist, I don't mean it has to strictly be a M. Night Shyamalan twist. A MidAct Twist can be anything that changes the initial trajectory of the story, such as a character reveal, a change in genre, a shift in motivation, or even a change in protagonist. It also doesn't necessarily have to be at the exact middle of the story. So, instead of looking at the second act as one large part of the story, look at the second act as two separate pieces joined together by the MidAct Twist. A good example of this would be Into the Spider-Verse. After the first act, Miles meets Peter B. Parker, and the pair have to sneak into a science laboratory. This whole section of the film could be a short film in and of itself, with its own goals, motivation, character arcs, and resolution.
We're a little team. Me as the teacher who could still do it. You as the student who can do it, just not as good. I'm proud of us.
The MidAct Twist of the film is the reveal of Spider-Gwen and all of the other spiders. The other spiders. This section challenges our protagonist Miles and his internal fears of identity and living up to people's expectations. The trajectory of the story has also changed. As opposed to the first half of the act where Miles and Peter are attacking the villains, the spiders are now playing defense against them and have to defend the MacGuffin. And once again, this whole section has its own motivation, character arcs, and resolution. The MidAct Twist is what joins these two stories together into one whole of a much larger narrative. The roots of the MidAct Twist most likely originate from musical theater. Before film, theater was the original way to present narratives visually to a viewer, and musicals were the original blockbusters, high-budget spectacles that drew in large crowds. In order to excite audiences between intermissions, the first half of musicals would end on an exciting cliffhanger that would shift the story. This was to ensure people wouldn't leave between acts. This is when Maria leaves to go back to the Abbey in The Sound of Music, when Seymour kills the dentist in Little Shop, or when the roof collapses on the fiddler? I don't know anything about this show. Les Mis has one of the most dramatic examples. The first half of the musical being this game of cat and mouse between two men that spans almost 2 decades. The second half of the show focuses heavily on a cast of characters that was just introduced at the end of the first act, and now takes place over the course of one day. The focus is less on Jean Valjean and Javert's rivalry, and more on the people of France facing down their oppressors. It's interesting to note that the June Revolution only takes up about 1/5 of the original novel. On stage, though, it's almost 50% of the whole show. This is due to having to adapt and change the narrative structure to fit the confines of musical theater. But that's a whole other discussion. It's also worth keeping in mind that musical theater has the advantage of an intermission to split up the two acts. Audiences can catch their breath for a moment without having to fear whiplash between a huge narrative and pacing shift like this. Which is also why this twist didn't really work in the movie. Just saying. But this is something to keep in mind. You can't make your mid-act twist too jarring, or else it won't feel organic. In the case of Gone Girl, the genre changes from a murder mystery to a game of cat and mouse between Nick and Amy, which are both subgenres of the thriller genre. Gone Girl doesn't go from a bleak whodunit to a feel-good rom-com. But it's this successful tonal and narrative shift that makes Gone Girl such a great movie. It keeps the audience on their toes, taking them in a direction they weren't expecting, while also keeping the themes and tone of an overall narrative intact. Where this doesn't work is Iron Man 2. The second act of this movie is kind of a mess. The first half of it is Tony Stark doing exceedingly crazy and immature stunts, like participating in a Formula 1 race. Even after the villain shows up and almost kills him, Tony just goes back to acting like a child. Then this awkward fight between him and Rhodes happens, and then Tony just goes to a donut shop. The mid-act twist is just Nick Fury showing up out of nowhere and telling Tony, so this is what you're going to be doing for the rest of the second act. These two acts of the film, the partying and Tony discovering the mystery of his dad, don't feel connected because the glue between them is weak, which makes the narrative change awkward. Which is a shame because the second half of Iron Man 2 is actually pretty interesting. I like Tony confronting his father beyond the grave, and we actually get to see him be the eccentric inventor again. Also, Phil Coulson comes back, and the world just needs more Clark Gregg.
We need you.
Yeah, more than you know.
Not that much.
But without a strong enough narrative through line, the second half just doesn't come together as well as it could have. Finally, I want to discuss a mid-act twist from one of my favorite movies from last year, Us. A twist that I don't think got enough credit. For the first half of the second act, we follow the Wilson family in their beach house as they fend off their doppelgangers. This whole section of the film follows the genre of home invasion films such as The Strangers. The stakes are kept intimate between the two families, and the scale doesn't go beyond the house and boat, I guess. And then this happens.
Hello?
Oh my god!
This is the first time we see any other doppelgangers in the film. Up until this point, we were led to believe that only the Wilson family has doppelgangers. Now, the stakes and scale of the story have been raised. The threat has gone from this one family to a national emergency. This twist accomplishes a lot narratively. It shifts the story, introduces new plot elements, raises the stakes, and ups the scale of the threat. It was also clever that the marketing only showed the Wilson doppelgangers, which led audiences to believe that these were the only doppelgangers they would be seeing. This is part of the reason why this twist caught viewers off their guard and had them excited to see where the story could go from here. Pulling off a mid-act twist isn't easy. It requires misdirection, building stories on top of story, managing character arcs, and keeping everything thematically cohesive. It's a ton of spinning plates you need to keep in mind, but that's writing. It's frustrating and anxiety-inducing at times, but when you're able to pull it off, you can really make something special. I hope you found this video helpful if you're struggling with your writing, and gave you something to think about with your next script, or you just found it interesting. But if you're taking the exciting leap into screenwriting, know that it isn't always easy, but regardless of whatever happens, you have my
fact!
Take care.
Baby, 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 please just tell me what's good. How long you trying to stay? She said as long as I could. I say as long as you can. Well, damn, that sounds like a plan. I think that might be the move. I think you might be the